This high priest, in broad daylight, brazenly entered the pharaoh's concubine's chambers and committed an act of public indecency with the pharaoh's alluring queen. Little did they know that in the heat of passion, the pharaoh suddenly returned to the palace earlier than expected. Though the high priest had just in time as the pharaoh entered, Ansunam couldn't conceal her anxiety. In the next moment, the pharaoh sensed something was wrong and asked his queen who had touched her. Before she could answer, the high priest, Imhotep, appeared behind the pharaoh. The pharaoh was utterly shocked to discover that the culprit was none other than his own high priest. With their secret exposed, Imhotep and Ansunam had no choice but to kill the pharaoh together. The pharaoh's screams quickly attracted the guards, and while Imhotep was smuggled away by his followers, Ansunam, knowing she couldn't escape death, chose to end her own life. After escaping, Imhotep, determined to resurrect Ansunam, led his followers into the tomb and stole her corpse. He then set off into the desert under the cover of night, heading for the city of the dead, the burial site of Egypt's pharaohs throughout history. Among the many burial items, Imhotep retrieved the Black Book of the Dead, preparing to summon Ansunaman's soul back from the underworld. The ritual began smoothly, but at the crucial moment, the pharaoh's guards burst in, interrupting the ceremony. Having murdered the pharaoh and trespassed into the tomb, Imhotep and his followers were condemned for multiple offenses. His priests were mummified alive, while Imhotep was sentenced to the curse of the Hamdai. This was the most sinister of all ancient curses, and Imhotep became the first to undergo this punishment. After being wrapped in bandages and placed in a sarcophagus, the executioners poured a jar of scarabs into the coffin. This meant Imhotep's soul would be eternally sealed within the sarcophagus. Due to the horror of the curse of the Hamdai, any soul punished this way, if released, would become a creature of immense power, capable of bringing devastation to the world. To prevent this from happening, a guard was assigned to watch over the buried sarcophagus. With the relentless passing of time, the year was now 1923. By this time, Egypt had become a British colony, and on the land of Hamunaptra, a fierce battle erupted between a treasure hunting team and the local militia. As the leader of the team, O'Connell stood ready with his companions, but with the overwhelming strength of the opposing force, O'Connell's superior officer quickly fled without even engaging. Seeing the approaching enemy, Benny decided his life was more important. Immediately abandoning his weapon and running away, O'Connell ordered his team to open fire, and while it seemed effective at first, the sheer number of enemies soon overwhelmed them. As they ran out of ammunition, the team's defenses were breached. O'Connell fought while retreating, originally intending to hide in a cave with Benny, but adhering to the principle of every man for himself. Benny locked the door behind him after entering the cave. With no other choice, O'Connell fled while searching for a new hiding spot. Along the way, he lost his weapon and was surrounded by the enemy. Desperately, O'Connell ran to a statue, and just as he closed his eyes, accepting his fate, the soldiers pursuing him suddenly stopped. The horses were startled by something unseen, and after glancing at the statue, the soldiers turned and left. Once the area was calm, O'Connell opened his eyes, realizing he was standing in front of a statue of Anubis, the god of death. Thinking he had narrowly escaped, O'Connell suddenly heard a strange sound, and the sand beneath his feet began to move. Panicked, O'Connell fled, unaware of the terrifying face forming in the sand, the face of Imhotep, who had been buried here 3,000 years ago. During the skirmish between the treasure hunters and the militia, another group watched from a high point. They were the descendants of the pharaoh's guards, stationed here to prevent Imhotep's release. Seeing O'Connell miraculously escape, one of the guards asked if they should intervene, but the leader stopped them. In his view, no one could escape this desert alive. 3 years later, in Cairo's Antiquities Museum, librarian Evelyn was organizing books. What was usually a dull job was filled with all sorts of excitement thanks to Evelyn's presence. While placing a book back on the shelf, Evelyn tried to take a shortcut, but the next moment, the ladder tipped over. She struggled to keep her balance but ultimately fell, causing the bookshelves to topple over like dominoes. Hearing the commotion, the museum director rushed over, shocked at the scene before him, but upon seeing Evelyn, he seemed resigned to such accidents, his words tinged with helplessness. The director regretted hiring her on a whim, but Evelyn quickly explained that she was employed because she was good enough. It turns out Evelyn could read and write ancient Egyptian and interpret hieroglyphics used by priests. Besides that, she was the only one within miles who could correctly catalog and index the museum's items. However, the director pointed out that she should thank her parents for their generous donations, which was why he tolerated her. With that, he sighed and walked away. Just then, Evelyn heard a noise behind her. She entered the mummy display room and found that the sound was coming from inside a sarcophagus. Fortunately, it wasn't a mummy coming to life, but just her brother Jonathan's prank. Seeing Evelyn upset, Jonathan pulled out a gift he had bought, saying it had caught his eye immediately. Evelyn, who was fascinated by ancient Egyptian history and dreamed of becoming an archaeologist, was intrigued when the box suddenly opened to reveal a map inside. Evelyn quickly reported her discovery to the director, explaining that the markings on the map indicated the seal of Pharaoh Seti I. She believed that the writing might describe the location of Hamunaptra. However, the director sternly rebuffed her. "We are scholars, not adventurers," he said, though Jonathan was fully convinced by his sister's words. Excited about the treasure at Hamunaptra, Jonathan wanted to leave immediately, but at that moment, the director accidentally burned the map, right at the spot marking Hamunaptra's location. Even so, nothing could quell the siblings' curiosity about Hamunaptra. Though the map was destroyed, Jonathan had another map. The box wasn't something he bought, it was something he took from a drunkard. Through inquiries, they learned that the drunkard had been imprisoned, so Evelyn and Jonathan went to the prison to find him. That drunkard was O'Connell. Though Evelyn asked about the box, O'Connell knew she wanted to know the location of Hamunaptra. He admitted that the box was found in Hamunaptra, which piqued Evelyn's curiosity even more. However, O'Connell didn't expect that instead of getting the information, he would lose his first kiss. Angry at his forwardness, Evelyn realized that O'Connell was the only one who knew the exact location, so she decided to save him. She negotiated with the warden, but the greedy and lustful warden developed an interest in Evelyn. When Evelyn refused, the warden immediately ordered O'Connell's execution. Hearing the cheers around her and seeing O'Connell in danger, Evelyn had no choice but to reveal the secret to the warden. She promised to give the warden 30% of the treasure once they found it. So the warden spared O'Connell. With the treasure hunting team assembled, they quickly set off on their journey. Evelyn was still upset about the incident, but after O'Connell cleaned up, she suddenly found him more attractive. All four of them were eager for the adventure ahead, but they didn't know that another group on the ship was also searching for Hamunaptra. Additionally, a small boat full of black-robed men was slowly approaching. The night on the sea was a bit dull, and the passengers gathered to play cards. Hearing that the other men were also searching for Hamunaptra, O'Connell immediately suspected Jonathan had leaked the information, and as he guessed, the men challenged O'Connell to a race to see who would reach Hamunaptra first. They were confident because they had a guide who had been there before. O'Connell didn't need to think twice to know it was his old friend, Benny. Knowing exactly what Benny was like, O'Connell took the opportunity to throw him overboard when he wasn't looking, but O'Connell quickly realized something was wrong. Footprints appeared on the deck, as if someone had climbed aboard from the sea. Meanwhile, in her cabin, Evelyn was still troubled by the kiss. As she bent down to pick something up, she stood up to find a black-robed man behind her. He asked where the map was, where the key was. At that moment, O'Connell, who sensed danger, arrived but didn't expect that the man had accomplices. The man in black immediately took Evelyn hostage. However, in the next second, a candle burned the man in black's eye, and the room quickly caught fire. The man in black intended to leave but then noticed a box on the ground. It turned out this box was the key he was looking for, but just as he was about to pick it up, Jonathan barged in and knocked him away. The flames then engulfed the man in black. Jonathan tried to take the key but was outpaced by the man in black. Seeing that their actions were exposed, the other men in black no longer hid and started setting fires all over the ship. The passengers, in a bid to survive, had no choice but to jump into the water. O'Connell and Evelyn also made their way to the deck. After throwing Evelyn overboard in a princess carry, O'Connell prepared to jump in as well. At that moment, a man in black jumped out from the side, and the two quickly engaged in a fight. In the end, O'Connell kicked the man in black into the burning room, and the prison warden followed suit. Jumping into the water, everyone was focused on escaping, but the men they were traveling with had established a stronghold and were fighting back against the men in black, even saving Jonathan's life at a critical moment. As one of the men in black fell into the water, Jonathan took the key from his body. Seeing that the fire was too intense and the ship was about to explode, everyone had no choice but to jump into the water. O'Connell and the others reached the shore, but Benny appeared and mocked them. He said he had all the horses, but O'Connell replied that he had landed on the wrong shore and that it was all in vain. Having lost their supplies, O'Connell and the others decided to head to the market. Jonathan haggled for a while and eventually bought 4 camels at a price higher than the market rate. Meanwhile, after changing into local attire, Evelyn had O'Connell completely captivated. Once everything was ready, The four of them set off on their adventure again. After crossing a desert that spanned thousands of miles, O'Connell and the others finally arrived near their destination and encountered a treasure hunting team led by Benny. The other side brought up their previous bet, and O'Connell was full of confidence. As the sun slowly rose, the silhouette of Hamunaptra finally appeared on a clearing in the distance. Everyone was eager, hoping to become the next millionaire. With O'Connell's help, Evelyn became the first person to enter Hamunaptra, though it wasn't particularly significant. It did win her the bet and $500. After the little speed contest, both sides began their formal treasure hunt. The Americans set up tents inside the city, looking as though they intended to empty the place out. Meanwhile, Evelyn and her group went to the vicinity of the Anubis statue, where she explained that archaeologists had once studied that the legs of the statue extended into the ground. It was said that there was a secret chamber there containing two great books from ancient Egyptian culture, the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead. It was believed that the Book of the Sun was hidden beneath the statue, which was also Evelyn's goal for this trip. Once everything was ready, the group descended to the base of the statue. By adjusting an ancient mirror, they reflected the sunlight from outside into the chamber, allowing them to see their surroundings clearly. As they explored further, they heard a rustling sound, as if insects were crawling around, but since no one saw anything with their own eyes, they didn't pay it much mind. After finally finding the legs of the statue buried deep underground, the Americans soon caught up with them. O'Connell refused to back down, but at that moment, Evelyn noticed something and quickly pulled the group away. They went to another location, preparing to dig from there. Meanwhile, Jonathan realized that the prison warden had disappeared at some point. As it turned out, the warden had embarked on his personal treasure hunt after the two sides had clashed. He crawled through a passage and arrived at a stone wall. Eyeing the blue gold embedded in it, without hesitation, he pulled out a knife and started prying it out. One by one, he went to work, thoroughly enjoying himself. But he didn't notice that as one piece of gold fell to the ground, a scarab beetle hatched from it and crawled into his shoe. The warden quickly felt something was wrong and tried to grab it with his hand, but to no avail. The scarab burrowed into his body, moving from his belly to his face, and finally up into his brain. Meanwhile, the Americans found a compartment at the base of the statue. One man was about to pry it open when the doctor in the group stopped him. He believed the compartment was likely booby-trapped, and such dangerous tasks should be left to the workers. Reluctantly, the workers did as they were told. Even though they were unwilling, as the doctor had predicted, the compartment was opened, but the high-pressure hydrochloric acid inside dissolved 3 workers on the spot. On O'Connell's side, there was also a breakthrough discovery. Jonathan, by accident, triggered some mechanism. A sarcophagus, buried beneath the statue, suddenly fell down. Evelyn explained to the two that there were only 2 possible scenarios for someone being buried in a place like this. Either the person was of noble lineage, or they had committed heinous crimes during their lifetime. Seeing the groove on the sarcophagus, Evelyn suddenly thought of the key the man in black had mentioned that night. She took out the box from her bag, opened it, and placed it in the groove, and sure enough, it fit perfectly. At that moment, the prison warden's screams echoed from outside. The 3 went out and found the warden acting erratically. He then ran headlong into a stone wall and collapsed, lifeless. Nightfall quickly came, and both groups returned to the surface. When Jonathan was rummaging through the warden's bag, all he found was a bottle of good wine, with the scarab beetle inside having vanished. Soon, a team of men burst into Hamunaptra. It was the same group of men in black who had launched a surprise attack on the ship. The leader fought with O'Connell before calling off his men but warned the treasure hunters to leave immediately. But his warning only reinforced everyone's belief that there must be treasure buried here. The next day, at dawn, both groups descended underground again. The Americans extracted a box covered in runes from the compartment they had opened the previous day. The experienced doctor noted that the box was covered in ancient Egyptian curses. A terrifying howl echoed around them, accompanied by a chilling breeze. The workers, unable to bear it any longer, chose their lives over money and fled. The Americans scoffed at the curses, but inwardly, they were also getting cold feet. The doctor then translated the curse written on the box. It warned that the box contained something dreadful, and if it were released, it would kill everyone. Hearing that something even more terrifying was sealed inside, Danny, driven by greed, was so scared by these words that he stumbled back, muttering about the curse as he turned and fled. The Americans, however, ignored the warning and recklessly opened the box. Inside was the Book of the Dead and several canopic jars used to store internal organs. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group used the key to open the sarcophagus. The man then forcefully pried open the 1,000-year-old coffin. To their shock, a mummy suddenly popped out from inside. Even more astonishing was that, despite being dead for 3,000 years, the mummy's skin was still pink and tender, like a child's. At that moment, O'Connell noticed that the interior of the sarcophagus was covered in scratch marks, indicating that the mummy before them had been entombed alive. Moreover, a death curse had been inscribed on the right side of the sarcophagus. Seeing the mummy behind them, the three suddenly had a bad feeling. Little did they know that from that moment on, the evil high priest Imhotep would return to the world. That night, as they passed by the American camp, Evelyn saw the doctor trying to open the Book of the Dead he had found in the tomb, and her curiosity was piqued. So, after everyone had fallen asleep, Evelyn took the Book of the Dead from the doctor. She discovered that it, too, required a key to open. Just like before, as soon as the book was opened, a cold wind suddenly swept through the area. Evelyn, thinking that reading more books could do no harm, didn't realize that this would bring about a great disaster. The book was filled with ancient Egyptian texts, which were right in Evelyn's wheelhouse. Out of habit, she instinctively began translating aloud as she read. Dr. woke up and yelled, "Don't read it out loud." Although the doctor woke up in time, it was already too late. Imhotep's soul had been released. The group, who had been sound asleep, was startled awake. They looked at the dark mass in the distance, bewildered. It wasn't until the mass came closer that they realized it was a swarm of locusts. To survive, everyone rushed underground, but the slower workers and the doctor were quickly surrounded by the locust army. Once underground, the group scattered in panic. Someone lost their glasses in the chaos, and being extremely nearsighted, he lost his way and could only call out for help. But the next second, his glasses were crushed under Benny's foot. With no other choice, he had to feel his way forward. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. Suddenly, a shadow flashed, and the man let out a horrific scream. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group were not faring much better. They encountered scarabs along the way. Seeing the endless stream of bugs, the three felt a chill run down their spines. As they ran across a bridge, O'Connell and Jonathan jumped to one side. Evelyn, however, jumped to the other side and accidentally triggered a mechanism, falling into a secret chamber behind her. It wasn't until the scarab swarm passed that O'Connell realized Evelyn was missing. Fortunately, Evelyn wasn't hurt and even encountered a lone man, but when the man turned around, Evelyn was shocked. He had lost his eyes, and his tongue had been bitten off. The culprit, Imhotep, then emerged from the darkness, but upon seeing Evelyn, Imhotep called out the name of his lover, Ansunam. He even extended his hand gallantly, inviting Evelyn to come with him. Just then, O'Connell, who had been evading the scarab swarm, passed by. When he saw Imhotep's true face, even someone as seasoned as him was taken aback. Imhotep mistook Evelyn for Ansunam and was clearly displeased with O'Connell standing beside her. Seeing a mummy daring to shout at him, O'Connell didn't back down and shouted back, then shot Imhotep, sending him flying. Taking advantage of this, the group hurriedly followed O'Connell out, but as soon as they stepped outside, they were ambushed by men in black. The leader told O'Connell and his group that they had released a 3,000-year-old monster, and now everyone was doomed. Since Imhotep didn't belong to this world, human weapons were useless against him. The leader handed the man, who had lost his eyes and tongue, to his American comrades and then led his men underground. As descendants of Pharaoh's guards, it was their duty to eliminate Imhotep. Elsewhere, Benny, who had lost his way from the group, stumbled into the room where the Book of the Dead was first discovered. Imhotep appeared silently behind him. To save his own life, Benny began praying to all the gods, and to his surprise, it actually worked. It turns out knowing multiple languages is indeed useful. Thus, lured by the promise of wealth, Benny became Imhotep's lackey. His first task was to help Imhotep find the other sacred jars. Upon safely returning to Cairo, O'Connell and Evelyn had a disagreement. O'Connell had fallen for Evelyn and wanted to end the journey and take her away from there, but Evelyn felt they should stay and help destroy Imhotep, or the consequences would be unimaginable. The two argued, and in a fit of anger, O'Connell turned and left. He went to the bar to drown his sorrows with Jonathan. At that moment, two Americans approached. They deeply regretted their earlier actions, as the fate of their comrade was too horrific. Just thinking about it now sent shivers down their spines. Little did they know, Benny had already brought Imhotep to their side. To regain his former handsome appearance, Imhotep needed to find the four men who took the sacred jars, drain their blood, and take their organs. This was the curse written on the box, but no one paid any attention to it. Imhotep's first target was one of the men. As a scream echoed, the first ritual ended successfully. Meanwhile, in the hotel lobby, the men who were drinking all spat out their drinks at the same time. They realized, to their horror, that their wine had somehow turned into blood. O'Connell reacted quickly, guessing that Imhotep had come for them, but before he could warn Evelyn, disaster struck the land. Fiery hail fell from the sky, destroying buildings and burning people. It was at that moment that O'Connell spotted Benny. Knowing him well, O'Connell knew nothing good would come from it. Suddenly, a roar echoed from upstairs, and Benny took the opportunity to escape. O'Connell, however, armed himself and went up to investigate, only to find the man who had been drained dry. Nearby, Imhotep had partially regained his original appearance due to the blood nourishment. O'Connell fired at him, but it had no effect. Instead, Imhotep easily pushed him aside. Imhotep slowly approached Evelyn, thanking her for releasing him and attempting to give her a passionate kiss, but a cat that suddenly appeared nearby scared Imhotep half to death, forcing him to flee as a sandstorm. Knowing she had caused trouble, Evelyn didn't plan to shirk responsibility, but the immediate task was to figure out who Imhotep was and how to destroy him. The only person who could answer that was the museum curator, but when Evelyn and the others arrived, they found that the leader of the men in black, who had tried to stop them earlier, was also there. With things having reached this point, the curator no longer held back. He revealed that he and the leader belonged to an ancient secret organization that had guarded the city of the dead for 3,000 years to prevent the high priest Imhotep from returning to the world of the living. Recalling the recent events, O'Connell voiced his concerns. The curator explained that those who opened the box were cursed and were doomed to die. Evelyn told the curator and the leader about Imhotep calling her Ansunam and his attempt to kiss her. Their faces turned pale upon hearing this because the main reason Imhotep was sentenced to the punishment of being eaten by scarabs was his love for Ansunam. With Imhotep's resurrection, the unfinished resurrection ritual from the past would undoubtedly be attempted again. The reason Imhotep treated Evelyn differently from others wasn't out of love but because he had chosen Evelyn as the vessel to resurrect Ansunam. Though this was bad news, it also gave the curator and the others more time to devise a plan. At that moment, the sky showed further signs of Imhotep's growing power, proving that his strength was increasing. With time running out, Evelyn and O'Connell immediately took action. They needed to find out which Americans had been cursed for opening the box. Besides the two people present and the glasses man who had already been drained, the only one left was the doctor. No one had seen the doctor since they parted ways in Hamunaptra. Moreover, the doctor had the Book of the Dead, which was essential for the resurrection ritual, so they had to find him before Imhotep did. O'Connell left the two Americans and Evelyn at the hotel for protection while he and Jonathan went to find the doctor. But first, they needed to locate Benny. After a friendly exchange, Benny revealed Imhotep's intentions. As the curator and the others had suspected, Imhotep wanted to retrieve the Book of the Dead to resurrect Ansunam. At that moment, a scream echoed from afar. By the time O'Connell and the others reached the source, the doctor had already been turned into a dried corpse. Imhotep's body had begun to regain flesh. Spotting O'Connell and Jonathan by the window, Imhotep opened his mouth and unleashed a swarm of locusts. The locusts descended on the streets, draining the blood of the people in an instant. But Imhotep wasn't satisfied and casually passed through the crowd, making his way to an apartment. With a wave of sand, the apartment's resident instantly turned into a dried corpse. Meanwhile, Evelyn, who was sleeping next door, was unaware of what was happening outside. It wasn't until Imhotep, in the form of sand, slipped through the keyhole and approached her bed to kiss her that Evelyn was startled awake. When O'Connell arrived and saw this, he immediately held up the old cat, causing Imhotep to flee in terror once again. But Imhotep wasn't going to give up. Since he was afraid of cats, he decided to let someone who wasn't afraid do the job. Under his influence and control, the people of the city took up torches and turned against O'Connell and his group. They chanted Imhotep's name, becoming emotionless slaves. As the museum was surrounded, Evelyn suddenly had an idea. Since the Book of the Dead could bring the dead back to life, perhaps the Book of the Sun might contain a way to destroy Imhotep. After translating the ancient Egyptian stele, Evelyn indeed made a discovery. The Book of the Sun was hidden inside the statue of Ra. Jonathan ran outside to start the car and, by sheer coincidence, encountered the bewitched townspeople. Thinking quickly, he chose to disguise himself and began shouting Imhotep's name. Once the immediate danger was over, he turned and started the car. But just as he rejoined O'Connell and the others, Benny spotted them, exposing their location. At Imhotep's command, the townspeople began to pursue them, even setting up a pincer movement. O'Connell, a battle-hardened veteran, immediately floored the gas and sped off. Though this method worked well, some of the fearless townspeople took the opportunity to climb onto the car. Despite O'Connell and the leader's strong combat abilities, they were unable to cover all angles, and the last American was eventually dragged from the vehicle, with the blood drained from him. Imhotep eagerly anticipated his full resurrection. When the screams rang out for the fourth time, Imhotep completed his resurrection and was no longer afraid of cats. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group were also in trouble. Although the car's four wheels were fast, they had to yield under constant pursuit. Soon, they were surrounded, and the fully resurrected Imhotep appeared. Under Benny's translation, Imhotep stated his terms. He wanted Evelyn to go with him. In exchange, he would release everyone. Evelyn approached Imhotep, as this seemed to be the only way to save everyone. However, after taking Evelyn and obtaining the key, Imhotep ordered the immediate execution of O'Connell and the others. O'Connell discovered another passage and forcefully opened a manhole cover, allowing Jonathan and the others to go first. The curator was supposed to follow, but in an effort to buy more time, the curator chose to sacrifice himself. Imhotep needed to perform the summoning ritual at Hamunaptra. With his 1,000-year-old powers, he could go wherever he wished in no time. However, O'Connell was not so fortunate. Considering the increasing danger to Evelyn, O'Connell had to find another way to travel. He sought help from his old friend Winston. As a former royal pilot now retired, Winston felt he had lost his purpose in life and spent his days drinking. So when he heard about a mission to rescue a beautiful woman, kill the bad guys, and save the world, he agreed without hesitation. The four of them quickly set out, but due to the limited seating on the plane, they had to travel in a front-back, left-right arrangement. As they neared Hamunaptra, the plane encountered a sandstorm. Winston and O'Connell shared that they had never seen such a massive one before. Little did they know, the sandstorm was so unusual because it was created by Imhotep. Thus, the two groups almost arrived at Hamunaptra simultaneously, but upon seeing the plane above, Imhotep suddenly cast a spell to lift the sand high into the air. To avoid crashing, O'Connell instructed Winston to push the throttle to the maximum. Unfortunately, they were still caught in the storm, and although O'Connell and the others survived, Winston was eager to leave as soon as possible. To save her loved ones and her brother, Evelyn had to sacrifice herself to interrupt Imhotep's spell. Seeing the plane crash into the sand, Imhotep left satisfied. The massive impact split the plane in two. O'Connell and the others were mostly unharmed, but Winston left with a smile on his face. For him, spending the final moments of life engaged in his greatest passion was the greatest happiness. Later, as they cleared the tunnel entrance, Jonathan noticed scarabs on the wall, similar to those from the prison warden. He thought they might be valuable, but the next moment, he regretted it. The scarabs emerged from their shells and crawled into his body. Fortunately, O'Connell noticed in time and used a knife to extract them, but this also exposed their location. Imhotep, busy preparing the summoning ritual, summoned his former monks to deal with O'Connell and his group. Meanwhile, O'Connell and the others inadvertently walked into a room filled with burial goods. Jonathan had only seen such a dazzling scene in his dreams. As he was too amazed to speak, a mummy responsible for silencing intruders emerged from the ground. Under the intense barrage of bullets, the mummies were reduced to a pulp, but they got up and continued the chase, deeply committed to their duties from life. During the fight and retreat, the three finally located the statue of the sun god. The mummies trailing behind were completely blown to pieces by O'Connell's bombs. Unexpectedly, more mummies kept coming in waves. The leader voluntarily went to deal with them, allowing O'Connell and Jonathan to focus on opening the compartment under the sun god's feet. Fortunately, Evelyn's earlier deduction was correct. The Book of the Dead was indeed hidden there. Meanwhile, Imhotep had begun the summoning ritual. He arranged Evelyn and Ansunam's bodies together and began chanting from the Book of the Dead. Soon, Ansunam's soul was summoned from the underworld and returned to her original body. At the same time, Imhotep approached Evelyn with a knife. Just as he was about to act, Jonathan arrived with the Book of the Dead. Hearing the name of the book, Imhotep immediately lost his composure. Taking advantage of his distraction, O'Connell came from behind and severed Evelyn's chains. Imhotep, enraged and embarrassed, ordered all his minions to attack. The mummy problem was temporarily resolved. Jonathan, after some searching, managed to summon the guardian spirits. Perhaps due to a language barrier, the guardian spirits chose to obey Imhotep's orders and began pursuing O'Connell. Meanwhile, Ansunam, unable to wait, started attacking Evelyn. All the pressure now fell on Jonathan. Although he could recognize ancient Egyptian writing, he was still not as adept as his sister Evelyn. He finally found the spell to solve the problem but was stuck on the last symbol and had to seek Evelyn's help. At the last moment before the Guardian's weapon struck, Jonathan managed to recite the spell, causing Imhotep to panic. Seeing his sister being harmed, Jonathan commanded the Guardians to eliminate Ansunam. Imhotep, desperate to get the Book of the Dead, tried to stop the Guardians, but it was too late. Watching the Guardians stab Ansunam repeatedly, Imhotep's eyes were filled with hatred. He lunged at Jonathan, but O'Connell arrived just in time to sever his arm. Thinking of all the times Imhotep had thwarted his plans, O'Connell decided to deal with him first. However, Jonathan managed to snatch the key from Imhotep during their brief contact. With the key, Evelyn opened the Book of the Dead and began searching for the spell to defeat Imhotep. O'Connell was tasked with buying time, but after several rounds of combat, his strength began to wane. Just as Imhotep was about to devour him, Evelyn finally found the spell. As she spoke the final words, the underworld chariot appeared. As it passed through Imhotep's body, it drained his powers. Refusing to concede, Imhotep tried to fight O'Connell, but forgot his own dire situation. Pierced by weapons, Imhotep faced death once again. While Evelyn and the others were reflecting, the stone walls around them suddenly began to move. It seemed that a switch had been activated, and the culprit was Benny. It turned out that from the moment O'Connell and the others entered the tomb, Benny had secretly followed them. He discovered the room filled with burial goods and, while everyone else fought Imhotep, Benny eagerly collected gold, silver, and jewels. However, his greed was insatiable, triggering the tomb's traps. In the end, Benny achieved his goal and spent the rest of his life surrounded by wealth. On the other side, after experiencing a high-speed escape, O'Connell and the others finally safely exited Hamunaptra. The leader had already been waiting outside. After bidding farewell to the three, he ventured back into the depths of the desert. O'Connell and Evelyn finally became a couple, while Jonathan, gazing at the collapsed Hamunaptra, lamented that their journey had ended in vain. However, as they mounted their camels for the return trip, they discovered a surprise prepared by Benny in their package. Under the sunlight, it gleamed with a golden glow. Every journey has a beginning and an end. Just as Imhotep's words in the annals of Rick said, death is a new beginning, and the stories of Egypt and the mummies will soon set out once again from this place. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.